And greetings, everybody. Welcome to today's Nooner. I'm Dave LaMont, and coming up in just a few moments, we're going to take a very deep dive into the legacy of the great Eddie Van Halen, a loss that I think we're all still feeling quite a bit. Just been listening to nonstop Van Halen in the car, thanks to the folks at Sirius who've taken their Deep Tracks channel and dedicated it toward his memory. Hell, I even heard a Gary Cherone song off Van Halen 3. I know. That's a deep dive, but I have a great guest standing by, and we will go into all of that very shortly. A couple of very significant, actually three significant South Florida sports items. One being the, I don't want to say demise of the Miami Marlins, but they're out of the playoffs. But in the, did you really expect any of this was going to happen? No. Nobody in their, if their left or right brain were working properly, would have ever thought that this team would be a playoff team, and not only a playoff team, but win a round of the playoffs against a favored Cubs team before they ran into a very hot and good Braves team. Couldn't even put together any runs in the last two. Are they ahead of where they ought to be? Absolutely. And again, we'll see what kind of major league season we have in 2021. Hopefully we'll get the full 162 and an opportunity for these players to develop even more. But you can't be anything but happy if you're a Marlins fan. I think you're insane if you're upset. I really do. Like completely committable 25th Amendment nuts. The Heat and Lakers tonight, and again, I offer you the same take regarding the Heat. My gut says we're at the end here tonight. Probably Dragic will take another shot at going with that torn plantar, but I don't know. And we saw, look, Anthony Davis played one bad game, and that's the game the Lakers lost. If he plays a good game tonight, it doesn't look good. Much as you want to, you can't blame Adebayo, but Davis on defense is so disruptive and was so disruptive in that last game that it's going to be very hard for the Heat to overcome that. And without a traditional point guard. And in that fourth game, a game that Miami, and I mentioned this the other day, absolutely could have won if they had been more organized on offense. And they weren't driving to the hole. And so they fell way behind in the free throw department. And you knew that Jimmy Butler was not going to be able to repeat his Game 3 performance. The Lakers didn't allow it to happen. They didn't shoot the ball. In fact, I think there were two players who took the majority of the shots, Hero and Butler. I think 35 to 36 of the Heat shots came from those two guys. And they at times just looked rushed and disorganized. They were late going into the shot clock, and the shots they did put up weren't good. Now, if they can change that, I suppose they have a fighting chance. But the Lakers have everything going for them. And I have firm belief that the series will wrap up tonight. But again, if you're a Heat fan, you look at what they have available to do financially in the offseason, the decisions they make. They seem to be on a little bit of a roll right now, making good decisions. This is a deep draft. So if they draft about 20th, I think, they have a chance to maybe get another role player. You can't complain. You can't. Saturday night, there'll be some complaining. Hurricanes versus Clemson. And here we go again, Hurricane fans, is the great Miami back debate, which we've already discussed, or I've already discussed with you. The answer is an absolute firm no. Even if they win this game, which would be an upset, they're a 14-point underdog, it is a no. All right, let's make sure we understand that. This isn't, I don't think, as great a Clemson team as they've had in the last, say, 3 years. I don't think they're as strong along the lines as they have been. But you know what? Neither is UM. I don't think UM can stop the run. And Clemson has a great runner in Etienne. I don't know if they can get to Lawrence. And if they do, can they do it with just 4? It'd be interesting to see how Clemson handles the running of De'Aaron King. And he may have to do a lot of it. And the other thing that's missing from this Clemson team that they had for, gosh, it seems like 10 years is a 1 or 2 absolute studs at wide receiver. I mean, guys who are, you could hand them a contract in the middle of a game and they could go right to the NFL. And I don't know if they have that. But Miami is not as good up the middle defensively as they have been. And I think that's going to end up being the difference in this game. I think Clemson will win. I don't think it's any great stretch of the imagination to say that either. It's not a very brave statement on my part. If the Canes win, then go ahead and thump your chest. But remember, they're not back. Not until they go about 10-0 and compete for the ACC championship and win it. Then we can start having that conversation. But the main conversation today regards the death at age 65 of someone I think of as a genuine artist. I don't think there's any way to describe Eddie Van Halen. And I'm guessing that my dear friend and guest, Rob Calvert, who is known as South Florida's Rob the Producer from his time with the Paul Castronovo Show, but has been all around the dial in his career and has had encounters with musicians that I could only dream about. And we discovered our mutual love for Van Halen over the years and our deep respect for Eddie, and I couldn't think of a better guest. And Rob, it's
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time. Hope you had a great time in New Orleans. How was getting out of there before the storm hits?
It was really problem free, but I'll tell you this: had you told me a year ago that at 9:00 at night on a Tuesday night you would struggle to find a bar where you could sit down and have a drink, I would have never believed you in a million years. And that was also the day that we lost Eddie Van Halen. Mm-hmm. And as fate would have it, me and my wife are walking down Bourbon Street. And normally I don't like doing, I'm not above doing the cheesy tourist thing, but I'm not really a huge, I'll walk into a hard rock cafe to take pictures of guitars and stuff, and then I'll leave. I'm not going to buy 300 t-shirts or anything like that. But we were able to sit down and have a drink. And as the guy walked by, and I hadn't had a chance to cruise around the place, and I go, "Do you happen to have any Van Halen stuff here?" He goes, "Follow me." And on the wall is one of Eddie's guitars. And of course, I have to take the picture of it and do the social media thing. And shortly thereafter, whoever was in charge of the video system at the Hard Rock decided to start playing Van Halen video after Van Halen video. So it was Eruption, You Really Got Me. And then they started playing from the Sammy Hagar era. And I don't care if you're Dave or Sammy or even Gary Sharon. I really don't care. That's not what this is about. They start playing the Right Now video.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And this drives Wendy crazy. Wendy, my wife, she is, every time I have something, "Oh my God, you got to watch this. Check this out. This is really cool. This is important because of this. And she rolls her eyes and goes, "Do I really have to get off the couch to see this?" No, it's not that important. I go, "No, but the Right Now video is the only video Van Halen did with a social conscience message." It's as Wendy later put it, it's timeless in the verbiage that goes out, about the value of enjoying the time and realizing what's happening at that exact moment in your life and appreciating the moment instead of letting them pass by. And we're watching it, and I could tell Wendy was like surprisingly moved by it and not at all resentful that I forced her to sit there and watch TV in a bar for 4 minutes. And it finally hit me, and I actually started to break down a little bit, because this is not just a guy in a band. This is not just a musician. This is a true game changer. You can count on one hand the number of people who actually changed music and the way their instrument was played. You got Chuck Berry, you got Les Paul, you got Robert Johnson, you got Jimi Hendrix, you got Eddie Van Halen. And there are millions of people who decided to get interested in music, see what their fingers could do, learn how to do something beyond themselves just because of the influence that this guy had. And I mean, I was reading an article today on in a Los Angeles newspaper from Ted Templeman, who was talking about, he didn't really back in the day like to go to bars and see bands play. He didn't like, "Oh, you got to sign these guys. You got to sign these guys." And he's just like, he tried to avoid that scene. And when he saw, he was not very, he didn't seem very high and mighty on David Lee Roth. But Eddie Van Halen, he thought, I have to get him in the studio immediately. It would be a crime against humanity if we didn't do that.
Well, I always have said that Chuck Berry wrote the Old Testament on guitar and Jimi Hendrix wrote the New Testament. But somewhere in there, Eddie Van Halen has to get mentioned because nobody sounded like that. When we all first heard Eruption, we never heard anything like that in our lives.
Well, you look at what was happening in the music at that time, because the first Van Halen album comes out in 1978. Everybody's trying to mentally recover from the blight that was disco. And then all of a sudden, Boston comes out. And, oh my God, it's an album with guitars. Yeah. And it's, and they were able to... Tom Scholz was able to create a sound that had never been heard before with a guitar, and people are going nuts. Then you got the Kiss thing happening. You've got Frampton Comes Alive, and then all of a sudden you have Eddie Van Halen coming out. And if you can kind of transport yourself back in the day where you're hearing, all the bands I just mentioned, and then out of the blue you hear Eruption for the first time. And you had people pulling off the highway, looking at their radios, going, "What the hell is this?" It was as a friend of mine, a guy named Rick James, who's a local musician here in the Cincinnati area. It made everybody before them seem like they were going in slow motion to steal his line, and it was like, okay, now the game has officially changed.
And it brought out the Randy Rhodeses of the world and all the other guys, the fast-fingered metal guy, hair metal band guitarists, and some of the others like Zakk Wylde and some of these other guys who were sort of, I think, spawns of Eddie. And I just saw a great video the other day about, I don't know if you follow Rick Beato on YouTube.
I know. I don't follow, but I know.
He just did, like 3 days before the death, he did a video of what it would sound like if different people played the solo from Stairway to Heaven.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
And he brought a buddy in of his who actually had a Frankenstrat, which is the red and white Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen guitar that he kind of cobbled together with this madman scientist part of him. And it was fascinating. The guy who came in and did a very nice job, and just what it would have sounded like if Eddie had taken that spot. If everything else about the instrumental was the same. Bono's part was the same, JPJ was the same, and the rhythm was the same. And it was fascinating to listen to what could have been, and never was, but still. The interesting thing is I expected to hear great tributes from the musicians, and I saw some from Flea, from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Pete Townsend, and many others. But it's the fan reaction, Rob, that I find interesting. All the people all over social media and people I've talked to who were so touched by this guy and who loved him and respected him so much that very few rock musicians in our lifetime will ever get that kind of acclaim.
Well, I'm also glad to see that, as much as a tragic loss as it is, if there was ever going to be a worthwhile break from politics, this would be it. And the other thing is, you've got diehard bleeding red and white stripe through their veins, and then you've got the casual fan who doesn't know anything. I've got a 14-year-old stepdaughter who knows who Eddie Van Halen is, but you see all these people now posting links to their favorite songs, their favorite albums, and it's bringing out songs like, how many people in the era of Spotify and all these other things where you're hearing, you're hearing the same, and it's true for commercial radio too. You're hearing the same 10 songs over and over again. You don't get to hear stuff like Full Bug, or I'm the One, or
that's the song, right
or
there,
Hear
maybe.
About It Later. And the fact that the people are going out, here's a live performance from Oakland. This is possibly the best show that they ever had recorded live. And you're watching the true power that band had. And, but getting back to the Ted Templeman thing. You had David Lee Roth, arguably the most charismatic frontman in the history of rock and roll. Don't know if that's true, but it's definitely top 5.
It kept him in that position because as a singer, we both know it wasn't necessarily his strength, but he was Dave.
But it was clear that the band was centered around the guitar playing and the virtuosity of Eddie Van Halen. And he invented a style. I mean, he's not the first person to ever do finger tapping, but he's the first person to do it like he did it.
And self-taught. Yeah, that's the thing. A lot, it wasn't like
Alex
he took 18 years. Yeah, both of them, and Alex underrated as a rock drummer. And when you mentioned "I'm the One," that's my favorite track of Van Halen because it comes out at 1,000 miles an hour with Eddie, and then here comes Alex, and then all of a sudden Michael Anthony comes in and you have these three together, this monstrous section of three musicians before Dave ever comes in and starts to sing, and that's the Van Halen I remember. And I've heard a lot of Sammy Van Halen in the last few days, and I'm starting to like more of it than I used to, except the ones where he's completely different songwriting. Sammy was writing love songs, which Van Halen songs were not really about love. They were about sex. And Sammy started writing more love songs. But I'm still hearing songs I didn't know very well or deeper early Van Halen cuts that I had forgotten about, like Spanish Fly.
Right.
Where you still hear this guitar, like you go, damn, there was only one. That's
one thing that always drove me crazy, because I don't see the point of competition at all, period. I saw somebody post the other day, and I guess this was in tribute to Eddie, but who was the better Van Halen singer? Okay, it's an argument that will never, ever end. Hopefully it'll dissipate, but, you have David Lee Roth, an entertainment machine, and you have Sammy Hagar, who's miles more musical and soulful. And even Gary Sharon is exceptionally talented. It just didn't work. But, if you're looking at album sales, Hagar era, not even close. They outsold David Lee Roth over and over again. But they're two different bands, but they're two great bands. And at the core, I never understood the battle between, Roth versus Hagar. In fact, I just read and this made me feel really good about it, I guess, leading up, because I had started hearing rumblings, I guess, in December. I'm actually surprised Eddie hung on this long, because there were people talking about he's only got weeks back before Christmas. And, of course, everybody's talking about why can't everybody patch up? Why can't we get one more show? Blah, blah, blah. Well, obviously, Eddie wasn't in the shape to do it. But I read an article, I guess Sammy and Eddie had patched things up, but wanted to keep it quiet because they didn't want to start rumblings about tours, and they knew it wasn't going to happen. So I guess for months over text messaging, Eddie and Sammy kind of put their differences aside and became friends again. And that seemed like before he passed, he was trying to achieve some form of closure. Hopefully he got the same experience with Michael Anthony, who didn't deserve anything that happened to him in the whole soap opera that became Van Halen. But hopefully Eddie was able to patch up all the things that needed to be patched so he could truly be at peace. And I know when he passed, he was with Valerie and his son. And you can't ask for too much more than that. You just have this massive legacy, and all of us, if when I die, I've touched 1/1,000,000th of the people that man touched, then my life was a success.
And he didn't have the easiest life either. And he has admitted about his cocaine and alcohol use and how he found it. And he was he said, I kind of did it in private. This is how I conducted myself. This is what I needed to do to get by, because he wasn't, while on stage he could be flamboyant and jump around and obviously express himself musically, he was a much shyer person away from all of that. And, he survived it. I remember, I'll never forget the first reunion tour they did with Dave. I went just up the road to see the show, and something happened during that show, because the last couple of songs, Eddie just wasn't right. And turns out the very next day they announced they were suspending the tour, and Eddie went into rehab. Saw them again with David with the Kool and the Gang opener. I don't know if you ever saw that. Yeah. Were you here then?
No, I was in Philly then.
And
I saw them at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City.
Okay. That had to be, I want to say, is that 5 years ago?
No, that was probably more like 7.
Okay. And he was clearly clean. He looked like he had been in the gym. And he just was, it was like watching a great artist paint. And when it came time for the big solo, instead of just trying to do 8,000 miles an hour and get it over with, he stretched everything out, really took his time, pulled everything out of that guitar that he possibly could. And it was really, I walked out of there feeling just great because I saw this guy and I said, I don't know if I'm going to see this band again. And it turns out that was the last time out of probably 5 times I'd seen them. But this was one I'll never forget because he seemed at peace on stage. And he looked different, acted different, and played just as beautifully as you could possibly ask a guy to play.
Well, and getting back to the Michael Anthony thing, there are fans who think Michael Anthony got screwed and blah, blah, blah. But, if you have a chance to get on stage and play with your son, and on that second David Lee Roth tour, you could tell that there was a genuine father-son appreciation thing going there. In fact, I read a tweet from, I don't know if it was from Wolfie or to or about Wolfie, but he when he was a kid, he was like, Dad, I want to learn how to play guitar. And his dad and Eddie was like, well, okay, let me find you somebody and we'll get you. He goes, no, I want to learn from you. And apparently that took Ed back a little because he just wasn't ready for that because he's a dad, not a guitar player. And maybe it was one of the first times he realized that his son knew who Eddie Van Halen was. Because I know your kids. You're okay, good. ESPN, Dad.
Yeah, that's how ESPN feels. I know that.
In your underwear.
Yeah. No, we even had the Van Halen Guitar Hero game we bought when we used to play. The 3 of us would play Guitar Hero together. Well, I went out and bought the Van Halen one. We gave up on Guitar Hero a long time ago, but when their musical tastes changed. But we had that, and I tried to keep up with that, and it failed miserably. I can't even imagine anybody playing it at the highest level unless they were a professional guitar player. But no, they know. I think people know. And the fact that this tribute, it just didn't end in a day. We just didn't go to a new news cycle like we so often do with these things. But this is continuing. I imagine Sirius will keep it going through the weekend. And thank God for YouTube, because there's enough Van Halen stuff on YouTube also that was shot, regardless of who the lead singer is, to your point, that we can at least sit back and enjoy what we had. And that's what's the only cool thing about this, Rob, and the same thing kind of with Neil Peart when he passed, is that you're finding out just how much these fans appreciated what the gifts these guys brought. Both of these guys were freakily talented people and driven to succeed, to showcase their best every time they took the stage or every time they went into a studio. And I think that's what we appreciate the most, is they gave us everything they had.
I also this is also a wake-up call for, I don't care what band you've never seen before. One day, hopefully soon, this whole coronavirus crap will go away and whatever is going to be normal will happen. Mm-hmm. And there is going to be an opportunity to see some bands that aren't going to be around too much longer. I don't care if it's the Rolling Stones or I can't tell you how thrilled I am that there's a new AC/DC record coming out.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, but we'll get back to the point. Yeah.
The most consistently awesome show I've ever seen, ever. Just consistently, show after show. It's comfort food to me. Or if it's Journey or Foreigner or Alanis Morissette or Garth Brooks, I don't care who it is. One day, these performers aren't going to be around, and you want to be able to say, I was driving with Sage, our 14-year-old, and a Green Day song came on. I go, yeah, I saw them in Philadelphia on the American Idiot Tour, and her eyes lit up. You saw Green Day? And I was like, oh my God. That's how I sounded when I found out somebody saw Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I never did.
Go see these bands. Go appreciate them. Go on YouTube. Become a student of all of it and absorb all of it, because music is the greatest gift that any of us could ever hope for, and you should absorb all of it. Not, the hits are great. I'm a big fan of the hits. I Ain't Talking About Love is an awesome song. But man, go deeper into it. Appreciate the stuff that they really wanted you to hear too, not just what you hear on the radio or on whatever the playlist recommends to you. Go out and really appreciate this stuff, because it's not something to be taken for granted, and you want to have the opportunity to go, I was there.
I still have my Green Day tickets for the show that was supposed to be last August. That's now been postponed to next August. I'm not selling them. There's no way in hell I'm giving those up.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And, I think of the shows that I've been to, hundreds of them, and you probably even more than me. I have not seen AC/DC, and I will. Now that they've fixed the lead singer problem and gotten the right guy back in there, I'm very happy for Brian Johnson. He's back where he belongs.
Because after the Axl Rose debacle, Cliff Williams said, "I'm retiring from the band. This is the one I'm signing for." And as much as Angus Young is the face of the band, it's bigger than that. And for me, I remember talking about this on the Paul Castronovo show after the Guns N' Roses. We had Guns N' Roses coming to Miami, and I just bit my tongue. And afterwards, they were like, "Why didn't you go to Guns N' Roses?" And I go, "Are you kidding me?" Because, listen, I love Coma off the Use Your Illusion 1 album is art. It's one of the greatest rock songs ever made, in my humble, unasked for opinion. I love Appetite for Destruction, another game changer album. That being said, Axl Rose, there is no bigger symbol of fan disrespect. I don't care if he's cleaned up his act. I don't care if he's apologized. There's no bigger symbol of fan disrespect to that. And to put him into the ultimate blue collar working man fan base, we're here for you band like AC/DC, to me was just an aberration. I sold my ticket the moment that was announced. I wasn't going to go to that. But now that you got Malcolm's son, you got Phil Rudd, you got Cliff Williams back in the band, of course, Angus, Brian Johnson. It's, with the exception, and I don't know how much of a fan you are, but for me, there are two bands that have achieved official comfort food status. There's never some misguided quest for artistic purity or growth. It just sounds good, loud every time. And those bands are AC/DC and freaking Motorhead.
Oh, I didn't see that coming. I thought you were going to say Kiss, because I know you're a big Kiss fan.
I'm a big Kiss fan, and they've got 5 great albums. And a lot of albums with some good songs on them.
Right. Okay, so no, and that's another band, but have not seen is Kiss, and for some reason, I don't know. I think all the personnel changes and all the BS has kind of turned me off to going to see them. But I'm glad you got me in to see Alice Cooper a couple of years ago, who was fabulous. He was absolutely fabulous.
But getting back to the original point, I don't care who you're a fan of. Don't miss the opportunity to see some of these bands, because one day they won't be there anymore, and you're going to look back and say, "I wish I had." And one thing I've said to Wendy many times is I have 2 main goals in my life. I want to be the 90-year-old with the best stories, and I want to be the 90-year-old who never says, "Why didn't I do that? I wish I'd done that."
Yeah, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. You don't want to leave behind an empty. I should say you want to leave behind no regrets and have all of your saddlebag emptied as much as you possibly can.
I have a sports question for you.
Fire away.
How do you not know it's 4th down?
I didn't see that moment last night.
Oh, I saw it. And
yes.
He's literally going.
I've seen the picture.
You're just watching. You're seeing him live on TV look completely confused, and that's not Tom Brady.
No, and the week before he throws 5 touchdown passes. Now, admittedly, they played a better team defensively with the Bears, and they did. And I didn't. I told people to kind of lay off of Brady in the world of fantasy football, but I didn't think he would have a fantasy of his own, a moment where he had a brain fart, because you're right.
Well, that's
brain
a major
farts are not his thing.
Well, to me, I remember when I was living in Philly, and I think once again, it was the Eagles and Bengals, I think. And the game ended in a tie. And you had the quarterback at the time,
Donovan McNabb,
saying, "I didn't know games could end in a tie."
Yep.
And you're just looking, going, I know that. And I could care less about college football. My favorite team is whoever's against the spread. I'm a fan. I know, but how do you not know that?
I don't. I remember that, and trying not to be mean to Donovan McNabb because he was a great player. But yes, and Brady's gaffe It's going to, that could end up costing them. I mean, a playoff berth, who knows how this year's going to turn out.
This isn't like explaining the infield fly rule to somebody who doesn't understand baseball. This is very one sentence explanation. I don't get it. But, that's also the heat of the moment. You don't know what's going on through his head. But apparently it wasn't that. and then there was
perhaps thoughts of Giselle. I don't know.
Well, that's me. So
there was
this. You have to choose one Van Halen album. Which one?
Inappropriate is your middle name.
Huh? You're going to choose Van Halen
number one because my song is on there.
I'm
the one is on there, and I'm not leaving that behind.
I'm going Women and
because I listen to Eddie's solo, and well, that's good too.
Yeah,
that's good too. But I listen to that I'm the One, and I that's why I posted that song on Facebook the day he died. As I said, you have to listen to this because I don't know if I've ever heard any guitarist, play with such happiness as he plays in that song. And the solo, it just looks to me like a small child skipping in a park. It sounds like a small child skipping in a park or playing on a swing. It was just joyful. And so
if you can find the Ted Templeman article I mentioned too from that Los Angeles newspaper, one thing he mentions, because before he got involved, I don't know if you know this, Gene Simmons actually is the one.
Oh, yeah.
And then he tried to change their name to Daddy Longlegs and even had a logo written up. And Michael Anthony just went, no.
He financed their demo, right?
Yeah. But then you get Ted Templeman in there and he's watching Eddie play. Getting to your point, you have somebody who's so proficient and powerful on their instrument, yet they make it look so effortless. When they went into the studio, Eddie was just noodling around on the guitar, just doing his little warm-up thing. Templeman looks at him and says, "What is that you're playing?" It's just a warm-up. Just something I do. He goes, "Oh, we have to record that." And the engineer already goes, "Oh, I'm already recording it." And that was Eruption. And
oh, wow.
And Eruption, Eddie goes, "Okay, I want to do another take." He goes, No, that was perfect. That was perfect. And obviously I never had this conversation with him, but I had always heard several times from several people that whenever he heard Eruption, he cringed because he could hear the mistakes.
Well, if you're at that, I've seen one musician at that kind of level where he just dominates his instrument, and it was in a weird location. It was in a bookstore in Washington, D.C. I'd say this is well over 20 years ago because I was accompanying my wife on a trip. She was going to a convention. I was just being a douchey tourist. And I walked by a bookstore and it says at 12 o'clock today, Bruce Hornsby will be appearing to promote an album. This is back, shows you how naive we all were back then. So
sure.
And it was free. So okay. So I just happened to walk in at 5 minutes before 12 and I had this big piano set up and he comes down the stairs and says hi. And dominated that instrument like I had never seen before. I mean, look, I knew he was good, and I don't know a thing about playing piano, but I know what I heard.
Yep.
And that piano was his biatch. He could have done anything to that. And then I talked to a buddy of mine who's a musician who's played for decades with some of the biggest names ever, including Sinatra and others. And I mentioned that to him, and he says, I've seen this guy warm up. And he started using some terms I didn't grasp. He says, his warm up is inhuman. Never mind what he does when he's creating. So Eddie sounds like that same, type of person who just was at a level, damn, I hate saying that was almost unattainable for anybody else. All the gunslingers and hotshots out there, and there's hundreds of incredible guitar players that we know of and hundreds more that we don't.
Thousands.
But yeah. There's guys shredding in bars. Well, will be again shredding in bars that will never get a recording contract and never make more than the $25 they get in tip money. But
that's the great thing about live music. I remember reading a review. One of my favorite live albums ever is actually Jerry Lee Lewis in Hamburg, 1968. And one of the reviews I read for that is a quote that I still carry with me because this is why I love live music in any form. Yeah, the guy said, at any given moment, anywhere in the world, the best band in the world is playing somewhere. It just depends on who's on that one night.
No.
And that particular night, Jerry Lee Lewis was being recorded. And at that particular night, they were the best band in the world. And they just happened to catch it. And it's a fantastic live album. So, I mean, you could go to, you know, I mean, that's one of the things that's really messed up with the whole coronavirus thing, you know, going down to New Orleans. There is no live music except for the occasional street musician. And the street musicians are awesome. But, you know, I mean, one of my favorite things to do, you know, I love going to open stage jam night whenever I'm in Chicago at Buddy Guy's Legends and just seeing random people you've never heard of out-shred anybody you've ever seen play in your local community. And they just happen to be the guy who's on the stage that night. And it's just, you know, live music is magic, and you never know what you're going to see, but you could see something that's transformative and emotional and moving and powerful. And it's the best.
Well, I have a quick Jerry Lee Lewis story, although he was not involved in this. Years ago, I'm doing a basketball game with the Hurricanes in Memphis. So we go to Elvis's restaurant, which I think is closed now, but it was Elvis Presley's restaurant, and it was packed. And the waiter said, "Oh, you should have been here last night." Why? Jerry Lee Lewis was playing. Oh, really? How was it? Oh, it was great. All the old Elvis guys came out. Really? Including Dr. Nick. And I just about fell out of my chair because as a Simpsons fan, the character Dr. Nick is named
back to that, doesn't it?
What doesn't? But the character Dr. Nick was named after Dr. Nick, who was Elvis's doctor, who prescribed him all those pills. And if you know on The Simpsons, Dr. Nick is a quack, is a complete and total quack, voiced by Hank Azaria. And I couldn't help but laugh at the fact that Dr. Nick was at Elvis's restaurant, and you know, Jerry Lee Lewis had been there the night before. But you mentioned the best band in the world. The night we saw the Foo Fighters, that was the best band in the world that night. There couldn't have possibly been anybody better that night.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of those bands. I couldn't believe it took me 25 years to see them, but you finally got that opportunity. You know, they were supposed to play here earlier this year. Obviously, that got canceled, but hopefully things are going to get back to normal here. I think every show. I think this year we were supposed to see The Who for the first time they played Cincinnati since the 11 people died 40 years ago. We were supposed to see Foo Fighters. We were supposed to see Chrissy Hynde, Chrissy Hynde with the Pretenders and Journey, Foreigner, Alanis Morissette, Ace Frehley was playing on the local casinos. That's now going on in April. But, you know, hopefully all of this stuff gets situated. They find out a way to make everything safe again, and we can go back to rocking and rolling and enjoying life again. I mean, there are so many shows that everybody should, and it's unfortunate that things are so expensive with the concert industry, but
they are.
What do you expect when no one buys records? You have to make money somehow.
Gosh, I never even thought of it that way. You're absolutely right. Listen, my friend, go ahead.
It's, you know, I mean, once the Napster thing happened,
right,
and people realized that, I mean, I remember getting in an argument with an intern when I was working at WEBN. And I'm so mad at Metallica for suing Napster. Think of all the bands that aren't going to get discovered now. And you know, I was finding all kinds of bands and sending it to my friends. And I'm like, okay, so you were supporting these bands by stealing their music and giving it to your friends. You know, which, you know what, that I know it sounds good, but you know, there was a band called Union Underground that was touring, and their record company, as I recall, dropped them in the middle of the tour because they weren't selling any albums at all. But they were getting so much radio airplay. People were taking the albums, sharing it with their friends, and blah, blah, blah. Now you got these streaming platforms where, you know, they're making pennies compared to what they were making. And the streaming platform directors are all saying stuff like, well, then you should just write more music. And it's like, really, it's that easy? Go F yourself.
If it were that easy, we'd all do it.
So, you know, when no one's buying records, especially with these old school artists, you know, where, you know, I remember there was one year, there was several years ago, there was only one album that went platinum, or two albums that went platinum. One of them was the Frozen Shift soundtrack. The other was Taylor Swift. And that was the year that AC/DC came out with a new album. Bruce Springsteen came out with a new album. Tom Petty came out with a new album. And, you know, these guys aren't going platinum. Well, because you don't have to. You don't have to buy the record. because you can get it for free every place. So, and this is where metal bands have it over anybody, because metal bands learned very early the value of a really cool t-shirt. So it's tickets, getting your guarantee, which in turn causes the promoter to charge outlandish numbers for ticket sales, and selling merch. That's how you make money. That's it.
Oh, you kind of froze up just a second. There you are. You didn't freeze up. There you are. I was going to ask if you could take, before we sign this thing off, if you could kick everybody an update on, since you left South Florida. I know where you are, but I'm not sure some of Paul's listeners who probably are tuned in or will tune in later know where you are and what you're doing.
I am living in a small town outside of Cincinnati, about 45 minutes away from my parents' house. I'm working from home with my LLC, with some writing and some radio-related projects. I have some other stuff that I'm toying around with. Actually, something like this is probably something that's going to happen sooner rather than later. And Wendy and I got married almost 2 years ago, and it's, to be frank about it, the most stress-free and drama-free I've been in 3 decades, and it's good. Well, I wish I hadn't lost some of the hair color after a while, but it is what it is.
Well, I'm kind of on a mix myself these days as well. I can't thank you enough for the time. I like
this format because it makes me feel like I'm the same height as you.
Oh, you're not?
Well, laying down.
Well, we don't want to tell people how we know that.
I don't want to know what that means.
As we start to drift into inappropriate land, it may be time for me to make lunch. So I want to again thank you. My very best to Wendy, and love spending time talking to you about music or anything. I really appreciate it, Rob.
Anytime. It's a pleasure. And thanks for the invite, and send my regards to anyone who might give a rat's ass. South Florida, I love you, and I love my time down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, the producer, Rob Calvert, joining us from John Cougar Mellencamp country. I'm Dave LaMont. And that's it for today's Nooner. We'll be back on Monday. Maybe we can figure out what in the world is going on with FAU as Rob starts to try to prove that he is as tall as I am, but he's actually not. That'll do it. See you all on Monday. Take care. Bye.